So this week, just reflecting on and reading all the news taking place throughout our country, in the world, I was thinking about how appropriate it was that our homily theme this month is Be Not Afraid. Because there's so much out there that could make us fearful or fill us with great anxiety. We've reflected this month on the fear of rejection, whether that rejection or the fear to be rejected by others, perhaps ourselves, or perhaps a fear that somehow God would reject us. And we've reflected that our dignity as human beings, our worthiness to be loved, isn't dependent upon what others think, or perhaps at times what we think, but rather it's dependent upon our identity as children of God, who are loved by God perfectly, despite our weaknesses, our struggles, our failures, and our sins. We reflected on our fear and anxiety around money. And again, our worth isn't dependent on how much money we have in the bank, or what we own, or how much we own, or even what our status is in society. Again, it flows from that relationship, from that love that God has for us, in whose image and likeness we've been made. And last week we reflected on that fear of death. That death is not the end of our story, that we believe that we live in hope of the resurrection. And likewise, reflecting on that, the other deaths that we experience in life, the other endings that we experience in life, the Good Friday moments, well, these don't end there. Whether it's a loss of a job or a way of life, but Good Friday continues on to Easter joy, that even in those moments of darkness, those moments of what seems to be the end, God is still present and makes himself known. And this week, we reflect on the fear of a loss of stability, or the fear of change. Now, stability brings a lot of comfort to us. When we experience transitions, even those things we know are good, they can create anxiety, stress, or even fear. Our younger members of our parish in their transitions from middle school to high school, looking forward to high school, but there's some anxiety that goes with that, and perhaps a little bit of fear of the unknown. The same from high school to college, and certainly the transition to college to life, and in life itself. We go from being single to married. We become parents. I had one person say one time that what really shocked them, was a shock to the system, wasn't so much being married or becoming a parent for the first time. It was going in and looking forward to buying the minivan for the kids. That was when they realized we're not in Kansas anymore. Those other transition, changes in our careers or retirement, things we look forward to, but come with anxiety and sometimes fears. And in those moments, we look for the signs that things will be okay. We look for stability. Could be our favorite restaurant, our favorite hangout spot, a family member or a friend, the man cave, or the church. Stability is a good thing, but it can become a problem when it leads to complacency. And that's what Paul is dealing with in the second reading. The Thessalonians, a group of Thessalonians who are believing that Christ's return, the establishment of the kingdom, is about to happen. So don't worry about it. Sleep in late. Don't worry about work or any of this other stuff, because Jesus is going to be here soon. Nothing to worry about at all. They become complacent in looking forward to that return of Christ. We can become complacent ourselves, comfortable with our routines, with our places of stability. We can stop progressing at those times. For example, being a Christian could be more of a title than a way of life. We can see discipleship as being about showing up for Mass or simply being a good person. We can become just focused on ourselves. That's why Pope Francis has been challenging us by saying the church is not a museum, it's a field hospital for sinners. And he got that example, by the way, from St. John Chrysostom hundreds of years ago before. We come here to encounter the healing presence of Christ, to be strengthened in our relationship with him and our commitment to him in order to go out and to live that relationship with others. Sometimes in seeking stability, we don't want things to change. We like a particular moment, a place, and we refuse to let go. And so we're troubled when Jesus says, all that you see here, the days will come when there will not be left a stone upon another stone that will not be thrown down. Now, the people he's speaking to would have found that quite controversial and quite disturbing. The temple was the center of their existence. It was the center of their religion, of their culture, and even of their economy. And here Jesus is not only saying that that temple will be destroyed, but that there'll be a time of persecution, of great turmoil and instability. Yet Jesus is presenting these not to frighten people, but to show them the opportunities that lie within there. Don't forget, he's preaching and forming these disciples to continue this mission after his ascension to the Father, to continue the proclamation of the gospel. It's right at the heart of discipleship. And so when he says that, yes, they'll seize and persecute you, they'll hand you over, be time of chaos and turmoil, he says that despite all of that, it will lead to your giving testimony. That despite all of that, the gospel mission will continue. The gospel will continue to be proclaimed. Example I'd like to use is one that we're all experiencing, but this applies in any of those transitions we have in life, or principles do anyway, that we are in the midst, a few months in, of a time of some instability within our parish. You have a new pastor. I have a whole bunch of new parishioners. We're both have to deal with something new here, right? And that can be disruptive at times. I suppose that what heightens this sense of instability is there's a lot of instability in our diocese and in our church as well. Parishes have closed. New configurations have been created. There's larger challenges and scandals that have rocked the church. We see mass attendance numbers continuing to drop, fewer baptisms and fewer weddings, a growing number of the population declaring no religious affiliation. And what we value and hold dear, the faith has been such a source of strength and stability for us, is mocked and rejected by a growing number of people. To us, Jesus says, you'll be hated by all because of my name, but not a hair on your head will be destroyed. By your perseverance, you will secure your lives. We are not alone in these great transitions in life. We're not abandoned by God. In the terms of the parish, we have the benefit of the work of many other parishes in the church in other parts of the world who have been successful in engaging these challenges and not only persevering, but growing. In the Acts of the Apostles, there's two examples of what the first parishes looked like in the early church. The first example comes from Acts chapter 2, verse 42. They devoted themselves to the teaching of the apostles and to the communal life, to the breaking of the bread, and to the prayers. And the result of this, Acts tells us, is the church not only grew, but it grew in large numbers. What these parishes looked like in that first century was different than what they looked like in the 5th century, the 10th century, the 15th century, the 20th century, and the 21st century. But while the externals looked different and the way the activities were carried out were different, they were also fundamentally the same. What was happening in those parishes in the 1st century, 5th, 10th, 15th, 20th, 21st century? The people coming together to learn, to teach, and to share the faith, participation in the sacraments, prayer, and community life. The challenge for us in the 21st century is not to look at the last 50 or 60 years and try and recreate models. We need to look at the fundamentals. What does it mean to be a Christian disciple? What does it mean to be a Catholic parish? And are we living this identity? Sounds simple enough, but it's incredibly challenging. Because we'll find in there that there's some things that we commit ourselves to that are fundamentally not a part of who we are or what we're about. we'll find that there are areas being neglected that we need to commit our attention to. Some things will need to be given up, some things will need to be strengthened, and some things will need to be created. All of this can be a little disruptive and involve change. Not changing our identity or fundamentals of our faith, but how we live that identity and how we engage that faith in the world. It's what Pope Francis was referring to at his first World Youth Day in Brazil when he said he isn't afraid of a messy church. Sometimes these transitions look very messy. Case in point, if you've noticed coming into church or traveling down Dartmouth Street here or Middle Street these last few weeks, the house across the street is being, remodeled and renovated. And the first part of that stage has been tearing down. Perhaps you could use the word destructing. And it's looked very messy. A little cleaner over there now, but still a bit messy if you look over there. However, in that mess that's being created, something new is emerging. Something better, something stronger, something more beautiful. The thing is, in all these spheres that we've covered throughout the month of November, rejection, money, death, transitions, our stability can't be found in the structures that we've created. The answer to those fears we can't create ourselves. They are what the letter to the Hebrews says, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is our foundation. He guides us through the transitions in life. He gives us the strength to persevere and to keep us from being swept away by the storms and chaos that sometimes occur. We trust in His love, His goodness, and His promises to us. Our times of fear and anxiety are times we should look to the cross, the symbol of hope. The cross was a time when all seemed lost, when Jesus' followers and those who loved Him were full of fear, experiencing unbelievable chaos. Yet God did not abandon them. It was in that chaos that God was at work, not destroying, but redeeming humanity. On the cross, God was defeating the world's control and its hold on us. He was defeating sin, defeating death, and defeating fear itself. Our times of anxiety and fear are signals to us to give up control and to remember the cross, to remember that God is with us, to turn to Him with all our hearts and minds, and to hear Him tell us what He said so often in the Scriptures, do not be afraid.